The warning Captain Vexthroat of the Meridian Collective had traded across 37 star systems without incident. His chitinous exoskeleton bore the marks of a captain who survived through caution and calculation. The Meridian herself was a modest cargo vessel, equipped with standard shielding and minimal weaponry, exactly what you needed to stay invisible in galactic commerce. But as his sensors detected the outer marker of human space, Vexthroat felt something his species rarely experienced: genuine uncertainty. The marker was simple: a metallic buoy no larger than a small moon, broadcasting in 7 different languages. The message was identical in each. This is the boundary of human-protected space. All vessels are advised to maintain course and velocity. Deviation will be noted. Deviation will be remembered. It wasn't a threat, not technically. The phrasing was almost polite. But across the bridge of the Meridian, Vexthroat's crew exchanged the particular stillness that came from recognizing danger dressed in courtesy. "Captain," his navigator Shex called out, her smaller frame hunched over her console. "The marker is old. Approximately 3,000 cycles." "How old?" Vexthroat asked. "Older than human spacefaring records," Shex replied. "This boundary has been here longer than humans have had the technology to establish it." That detail should have been reassuring. Instead, it terrified the captain. He pulled up the historical databases, accessing the old traders' tales. Stories most galactic merchants dismissed as cautionary fiction. The narratives were consistent across species. Centuries ago, before the Trade Commission standardized relations, various powers had tested human space. The results were always the same: ships that crossed the boundary never returned. Not destroyed in combat, not lost to accident. Simply gone. Not even wreckage. The galaxy had collectively decided to stop testing, and the memory had faded to myth. "Resume original heading," Vexthroat commanded. "Full standard velocity." But that evening, as he reviewed the trade reports in his quarters, his communication officer Krell burst through the door without protocol. "Captain, we're receiving a transmission from Commander Trixhall." Vexthroat's mandibles twitched. Trixhall was a rival captain from the Score Dominion, commanding the Aggressive Margin, a military-grade escort vessel. They'd competed for contracts across 3 sectors. More than once, drinks had nearly turned to violence over matters of pride. The message was simple: challenge accepted. "The human boundary is ancient theater. I'm crossing at dawn." Vexthroat felt something shift in his gut. Trixhall was bold where Vex's throat was careful, aggressive where Vex's throat preferred subtlety. But Trixhall was also reckless in the way only someone never truly tested could be. Within hours, the decision spread across the galactic networks. A captain was crossing the human boundary, the marketplace that existed at the outer edge of human space, a lawless collection of stations and platforms where traders moved goods to contraband for official channels, erupted in activity. Beings from 100 species gathered to watch via long-range sensors. Some believed Trixhall would prove the old stories were fabrication. Others were simply gathering to witness whatever came next. Vexthroat received an official communication from the Diplomatic Council of 7. They wanted him, as an independent observer and witness, to accompany Trixhall into human space. They wanted documentation of what happened. They wanted proof that the boundary was either real or illusion. The request wasn't a request at dawn, though dawn meant nothing. In the cold of space, the Meridian and the Aggressive Margin aligned their vectors toward the inner marker of human space. Vexthroat could see Trixhall's vessel on the visual feed, sleek, angular, weapons prominently displayed. Trixhall had shut down communications, maintaining radio silence as they approached. The marker appeared first as a shimmer, then resolved into something impossible. It wasn't a buoy like the outer marker. It was a ship, ancient beyond measure, its hull scarred and patched, yet radiating an aura of functionality that made every sensor on the Meridian shudder with conflicting readings. The vessel was larger than stations Vexthroat had only read about. And it wasn't alone. As his eyes adjusted to the visual spectrum, he realized there were dozens of them. Hundreds. Ancient human vessels arrayed in precise geometric patterns, silent and waiting. Trixhall transmitted his crossing vector to all channels. A bold, aggressive announcement that he was entering human space with no hostile intent, but with the unambiguous declaration that he would not be turned back by legends or warnings. For 3 seconds there was nothing. The oldest human ship, the one that had been closest to the boundary, simply shifted position. Not an aggressive movement, not even rapid, just a gentle, inevitable rotation that pointed what might have been weapons or sensors directly at the aggressive margin. Then, on all frequencies simultaneously, a single human voice spoke. It was calm, measured, speaking in standard galactic trade language with perfect accent. "Turn your vessel around. Now." That was all. No elaboration, no explanation. Just 4 words spoken with the certainty of someone stating a fundamental law of physics. Trixhal's reply was defiant. "I have the right of free transit across open space. Human territory begins at the inner marker, which I have not yet crossed. I am exercising my rights under the Galactic Commerce Treaty." That treaty, the human voice replied, was established by species that respected boundaries. "You have ignored 3 warnings. You are now receiving your final warning. Turn around." Vex's throat watched as the ancient human vessels began moving, not toward the aggressive margin, around it, a coordinated pattern that wasn't threatening, but was undeniably surrounding. Dozens of ships, each one older than established galactic civilization, executing maneuvers with the precision of a single consciousness directing many bodies. "This is psychological warfare," Trixhal broadcast, but Vex's throat could hear the wavering confidence. "I'm maintaining my course." The human response came not in words but in action. The closest ancient vessel activated something. Not weapons fire, not a tractor beam, but some form of technology that the Meridian's sensors couldn't identify. The aggressive margin systems went haywire, not damaged, not under attack, but screaming with an incomprehensible cascade of readings that forced Trixhal to cut power and emergency dock with the Meridian rather than risk catastrophic system failure. When the screaming stopped, Trixhal was in a communication pod requesting emergency assistance. His ship was intact. His crew was unharmed. But every one of his weapon systems was offline, and his navigation would only function if he turned around. "The aggressive margin has been neutralized," the human voice explained, still calm, still certain. "You may be towed to safety by your companion vessel. You may never approach this boundary again. These terms are not negotiable." Vex's throat didn't hesitate. He initiated tractor fields, engaged Trixhal's vessel, and began a gentle reverse course. Behind them, the ancient human ships resumed their geometric patterns, patient and eternal. As they limped back to the outer marker, the galactic networks erupted with activity. The boundary was real. The old stories were true. Humanity didn't have an army at the edge of their space. They had something older, something stranger, something that existed outside normal categories of power. And they would defend it without hesitation, without mercy, without ever raising their voice. The galaxy had finally learned what the oldest traders had always known. Some boundaries should never be tested. The reckoning, the emergency assembly of the 7, was called within 6 hours. Vex's throat found himself in the central council chamber of the diplomatic station, facing representatives from the Krellian Empire, the Skor Dominion, the collective consciousness of Vexhar, the sovereign planets of Kaleth, the Trade Commission Federation, the ancient guardians of Solemn, and the unified collective of Zenthal. Commander Trixhal's superior officer, stood trembling with barely contained rage. "This is an act of war. A human vessel disabled a military craft in international space. The Skor Dominion demands compensation and immediate retaliation." "Against what?" interrupted Ambassador Shix of the Krellian Empire, her voice carrying the weight of an ancient species. "What do we retaliate against? We don't even know where their primary settlements are. We've never successfully mapped human space. Because they hide," Trixhal spat. "Because they're cowards who use ancient technology to bluff." The communication array activated with no warning. Every channel flooded with a single signal. A human transmission, but not voice this time. Images, ship after ship after ship, each one ancient, each one bearing marks of actual combat, not theoretical military hardware. Vessels that had fought, that had won, that had survived wars older than most galactic civilizations could conceive of. The transmission ended with text in perfect trade language. "The boundary exists to protect what humanity preserves. We do not seek conflict, but we will not be tested again." The council chamber fell silent. That's when Vexhal noticed something that made his blood run cold. The oldest member of the council, elder mix of the ancient guardians, a being who had lived for 10,000 cycles, was trembling with something that looked like recognition. "What is it?" Shix asked. Elder Mix took a long moment before responding, his voice barely above a whisper. "I remember. The architects. Before the great schisms, before the species separated into factions, there were the architects. They weren't human. They couldn't have been. But they built things that looked like what we just saw. That was 5,000 years ago. We assumed their technology was lost. You assumed wrong," a new voice interrupted. A human had entered the chamber. A woman with dark eyes and weathered features, accompanied by no guards, no weapons, no threat. She wore simple clothing and carried herself with the ease of someone standing in her own home, despite being surrounded by potential enemies. "I am Envoy Kieran Hayes," she said, moving to the center of the chamber. "Humanity has watched this council for 73 years. We've observed how you conduct diplomacy, how you resolve disputes, how you treat those weaker than yourselves. We have one thing to tell you about the boundary." The council leaned forward. This was unprecedented. "It doesn't protect us," Kieran continued. "It protects you." The confusion in the chamber was palpable. Trexhal laughed. "Protects us from what? Your ancient ships?" Kieran's expression didn't change. "From what you would do if you knew what we were preserving. From what you would destroy because you couldn't understand it. From the wars that would consume this quadrant if certain knowledge became common." She activated a data crystal. Holographic images filled the chamber. Not images of weapons or military installations. Images of something else entirely. Gardens, monuments, archive buildings, laboratories. And moving through them carefully, reverently, were humans. Thousands of humans, maybe millions. "There are things in human space worth more than any military power," Kieran explained. "Not to us. To the entire galaxy. Backup copies of every sentient species' genetic library. Records of civilizations that no longer exist. Technologies that could cure diseases, extend lifespans, solve problems you've struggled with for centuries. We preserve them. We keep them safe. Why would we destroy them?" Shix asked, genuine confusion in her voice. "Because you fought wars over territorial rights that harmed less," Kieran replied. "Because you would probe and test and eventually, inevitably, weaponize what you found. Humanity chose a different path. We became the keepers. We became the boundary." Elder Mick suddenly stood, his ancient frame straightening. "The archive. The architects weren't a separate species. They were your ancestors. Humans. You've been guarding the archive for millennia." Kieran didn't confirm or deny. She simply moved back toward the chamber door. "The boundary stands. Humanity will defend it, but we don't ask for conflict. We only ask that you tell your species. Some questions don't need answers. Some knowledge is safer preserved than distributed. Some boundaries exist for reasons you might not understand but should respect." Before anyone could respond, she was gone. The council chamber erupted in chaos. Accusations, demands, denials. But something had shifted in the room. Elder Mix was nodding as if remembering something crucial. Shix was quietly accessing historical archives, cross-referencing the architects with human emergence patterns. The vote was unanimous, though for different reasons. The Score Dominion would accept the boundary in exchange for guaranteed access to certain medical technologies. The Krellian Empire demanded cultural exchanges and scientific partnerships. The others negotiated their own terms. But the heart of the decision was the same across all species. Respect the boundary. Protect the archive. Let humanity keep what they had chosen to preserve. As Vexthroat returned to the Meridian, he found new data in his personal files. An encrypted message from Kieran Hayes. When he opened it, he found a single image. The archive. A glimpse of something vast and impossible and precious. And a message: "Thank you for being a witness. Thank you for turning back. Thank you for helping the galaxy understand that sometimes the greatest strength is knowing what not to take." He deleted the message, filed his report, and plotted a course away from the boundary. Behind him, the ancient ships maintained their eternal watch, protecting something the galaxy would never fully understand, but had finally learned to respect. The boundary remained. The archive was safe. And humanity, the youngest species in known space, had proven they were also one of the wisest. Some gates should never be opened. Some treasures should never be claimed. Some boundaries, once established, should be honored forever.